friends, it's Sherry Ricard with the Real Girl Talk Podcast. I'm an author, speaker, business leader, and adversity recovery expert. I'm bringing you fabulous guests, lifestyle tips, and a weekly dose of inspiration to help you create a beautiful life. So grateful that you're here. Now let's dive in.
The loss of a loved one is a nearly universal emotional crisis. Unprocessed grief and painful feelings can be buried, leaving you to feel numb. But there is hope. Certified grief counselor, RN, and author Sherry Ricard shares her story of how to cope in her first book, Wake Up Call, A Mother's Grief Journey, after the loss of her 17-year-old son. This book, along with Sherry's other books, are available on Amazon as well as on sherryricard.com.
Welcome back, friends, to Real Girl Talk. I'm your host, Sherry, and it is so good to have you here. Thank you for joining me every single week. And I am feeling the Cajun vibe today because my guest is a true Southern belle straight from Lafayette, Louisiana, social media influencer and the host of podcast Enlightened, Sophias Spallino. Welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I am excited too because I met Sophia through one of my followers actually on Instagram. Her name is Paige. Shout out to Paige. And we instantly connected. She calls me her IG mama and I just call her my little princess because she's adorable. And I was a guest on her show Enlightened. If you haven't listened to it, go back and download it. Listen to her shows. They're awesome. And I couldn't wait to have you on for my listeners. But I want to start off with you telling me a little bit about your story as far as how you got into podcasting.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for all the sweet words. Y'all, if you haven't heard my episode with Miss Sherry, you have to listen. She's so filled with wisdom and she just gave me this huge pep talk. She's like my IG mama, but it was nice to get on and do this podcast because gives me a pep talk and oh my gosh, you're just such a good coach. With that being said, I got into podcasting because I was kind of not sure where I was going being an Instagram influencer. And one of the most important people in my life told me, this is the year you figure out who you are and figure out who you want to be on the internet. And I think you have so much more to share than just fashion, fitness, beauty. There's nothing wrong with those things, but I think there's something deeper in you. And that person said, how about you write a book? And I was like, I don't know, that's not really my calling, I don't think. I like to blog, whatever. And then that person said, well, what about a podcast? And I thought, well, that'd be easy. Let me tell you, it's not easy. I thought
it's not easy.
Writing. Oh my gosh, what I would give to just write now. But yeah, I love speaking. And I guess I used to work at Disney back in 2012 in the college program. And I remember, so this was very instrumental memory for me. I was finishing up a tour. I hosted the Great Movie Ride. Always had that $1 million Disney smile no matter what my day was like. And I remember it was a rough shift and I had just given my all for this show. And a girl at the end kind of touched my hand. She was just a guest on the ride. I don't know who she is. But she just looked at me so sincerely and said, I don't mean to spook you, but are you a Christian? And I said, yes. And you won't spook me. And she said, well, I just want you to know that God told me he's going to use your voice. And I get goosebumps now just thinking about that. And oh my gosh, I might cry. It was such a weird moment for me because I remember looking at her and going, thank you, but I don't sing. And she said, no, you don't need to sing. God's going to use your voice. And my whole life, I always wanted to sing. My family's so musical. I play the harp. But I always remember certain people in my family saying, you can't sing. God didn't give you that gift. So it always, in my head, it was like, I'll never use my voice. You know, I'll use my brains. I'll use my face. I'll model, whatever, but I'll never use my voice. And I think just hearing that from her and then hearing it from the man in my life that was there to encourage me.
Yeah.
Saying that I needed to use my voice was the final push into having a podcast. And now I do, and it's called Enlightened the Podcast.
And you know what I love about your podcast is the actual harp playing. It's like, And I know you talk about it being the guided meditation, and your voice is so sweet and it's just so soothing when you join the podcast. And I love it. It's beautiful. And so I knew that you played the harp, but I didn't know where that started. Was that because your family, I'm just learning your family's musical. So is that where it came from?
Honestly, I have to say it's just a God thing because there is no rhyme or reason. My parents say not my first word, but one of my first requests as a child was harp. Give me a harp. Harp. All they would hear for Christmas was harp. And I'd look under a tree and I wouldn't see a harp-shaped gift and I would cry. And I don't remember this, but that's what they tell me. But what I do remember is my mother pulling up to my little private Christian school. And it was always a rough day, girl. Oh man, the craziness that I dealt with at the small school. I remember her pulling up and I got in the back of the back seat and she said, well, look in the very back. And it was a harp laying down on blankets. And she had just picked it up at an antique store. And it's one of my most special memories. So,
now with your podcast, Sophia, what is your audience? What is your target audience that listens to your show the most?
Here's the thing. When I started the show, I thought I was only going to do harp related podcasts with spirituality. So I would play the harp and have guided meditations that I write myself or guided affirmations. So self-love and self-care affirmations, and mix in some Christian principles that can be applied to anyone's life, a very progressive spiritual podcast. Now it's evolving. I think people really like the conversations and the self-care conversations as well as the spiritual conversations. So I may pull back on the meditations and harp music and just do maybe one episode like that a month or even every other month. And then just do these very broad spiritual conversations, because I think everyone likes hearing that while they drive, whereas they can kind of play the same meditation over and over if they really resonate with it before bed. If I do one every couple of months, it makes people happy.
Yeah. And I know we were talking about the Christianity aspect of your podcast. And, one thing that I always do at the very end of my podcast, I tell people to keep their faith in God and, step out of their comfort zone and try something new. And I had someone tell me, just like you have, is there going to be a point to where those that aren't Christians are going to steer away from your podcast? And does that really matter to you?
It matters to me because I don't want to ever, when I get to heaven, I want God to say, well done. I want to be a good daughter. But at the end of the day, people give pastors like Joel Osteen a lot of hate because they say he's too watered down. But I think God ordained Joel Osteen to be that light for the people who wouldn't be ready for the really deep stuff yet. And so
Right.
I want my podcast to be a place for everybody. And as I do with both Christian content and non-Christian content, I'm not saying I do this with the Bible, but with content, I take what I want and I leave the rest. And I never get offended by someone's content. And if people do get offended easily, maybe they wouldn't be my ideal audience, I guess. But I just want to attract some open-minded girls like me who say, gosh, I love growing spiritually, but I'm not sure I fit in as being the perfect church girl, but I'm also not, living a life that wouldn't have any spiritual grounding. So,
Right.
yeah.
No, I totally understand that. And one person that I follow, Devon Franklin, and I know you've probably heard me talk about him before, but he is, guys, if you are not following Devon Franklin, I'm going to meet this man one day because he's amazing. He's actually a preacher, but he's a Hollywood director and producer. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that he said was, someone asked him when he was supposed to go to Hollywood, he was going, I guess, to do an internship. And they said, you can't go down there to Hollywood. There's just a bunch of sinners down there. And he said, well, that sounds like where I need to be. And so he went to Hollywood. He went through all these trials and tribulations trying to, break in. And he got on with Sony as an intern, and then eventually started his own company. And of course, all of us know the movie Breakthrough with the boy that drowned and, he came back to life. And that movie was a big hit. Well, that was his movie. So, and he also produced Heaven is Real and all these big time movies. And one thing that he said was, when somebody told him, about going to Hollywood and not being surrounded by Christians, and that he needed to make sure that he kept his foot where the Christians were. He said he felt that that was just the opposite for him, that he felt that the Christians, or majority of the Christians, are in church, but some of the people that aren't Christians go to the movies. And so he produces movies that plant mustard seeds to get the people from the movies into the church. And I just remember hearing him tell that story, and my heart, like, I'm getting goosebumps again from him telling that story. And I thought, if I can just reach someone that is grieving, or someone that is going through some type of adversity, and that they turn to God for help, then I've done my job. And I think that you do it the same way with your heart music, and with your guided meditation, and making sure that the spirit stays there in your podcast. Then God's going to send the right people to your show regardless of what you're doing on your show. So I applaud you. I think your show's beautiful. I don't think you should change anything. I think bringing in more people into your show is just going to add to it. But the guided meditation and the way you start it is just it's basically your brand. You know what I mean? So it's your brand, and that's what you need to stick to. But we're going to shift a little bit and talk about adversity and bringing that up. You've been through your share of adversity, and you are young, you're in your 20s, but you've been married and divorced already. And I know a part of that was why you started your podcast too, because you wanted that voice. But so tell us a little bit about your story and some of the abuse and things that you went through in your early 20s, being married that young.
Okay. Well, first, I'm going to talk about a few different things, but I do want to say I take full responsibility for my actions. I'm not blaming one thing or another. But with that being said, I do feel that the pressure of the South to get married young, mixed with the very toxic purity culture that I was raised in. When I was 12, my dad took me on a date, gave me a purity ring, a diamond ring, an engagement ring essentially, and said, "This date is how a man should treat you, and you should never, ever let a man touch past your knee. You do not want to have sex before marriage. It is bad." And it was just in the time I was like, this is so sweet. My dad really loves me. He's taking me to roofs, Chris, and this is so special, and this is what a man should do. And hey, I want a man that does all those things still, and I do have a man that does all those things still. But what I didn't realize is a lot of the things that my parents taught me, and I know they didn't intention it this way, but it was part of a very toxic purity culture. And if you're not a Christian and not from the South and you weren't indoctrinated into this, it's kind of a teaching that tells you you're literally valued based on your level of purity. So they tell little girls, if you were a chocolate bar and you let each boy take a bite out of your chocolate bar, then what do you have to give to your husband? First of all, we're not chocolate. I'm not saying you need to sleep around to find yourself. I'm not saying that philosophy works for me. I'm just saying that there is no one way that should be preached. I understand that the things God says in the Bible is for our protection, and I want to honor that, and I want to honor my temple with who I share myself with. But back then, let me tell you, I didn't kiss my first boyfriend. I didn't have my first kiss till I was 19, and I was pretty traumatized by it. After, I felt really dirty. I felt like it was wrong to enjoy the kiss. I went away telling people I didn't mean for it to happen. I was kiss raped. I didn't mean it. And I really, I believed it. It was very hard for me. College was rough. I was homeschooled, and I went to LSU. It was a very big party school. So going to those parties felt sinful. Even if I wasn't having more than a drink, I felt like it was so wrong to be around all these boys. It was just, it's what purity culture did to me, the way I dress, everything. So when I did move to LA, I met a man. It was one of those love at first sight, quote unquote, things. And I think I found a guy that took me to church 3 times a week. He took me to Judah Smith's church. He took me to the Dream Center church. He took me to Hole in the Wall church. Every day was a church. And I thought, I found a Christian man. This is going to be amazing. He's the one. And I'm not saying any of this stuff to bash him. I hope his next person he treats with love, dignity, respect, kindness, and I wish nothing but the best for him. But over time, he didn't treat me that way. Even though he was a quote unquote good Christian man, he treated everyone else, and you can ask anyone in my life, he treated everyone else with kindness except me, or respect except me. And he would blame me for a lot of things. There was a lot of mental abuse, a lot of manipulation. I would find out, certain money had been pulled out the bank account to cover his back taxes from before we were married. And every time I worked like 3 part-time jobs because he didn't believe what I did as an entrepreneur was good enough, even though we went through premarital counseling and he knew I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and entrepreneur, but to him that wasn't valid. So I always worked to validate myself for him. And one day I just realized I couldn't make this man happy. He would wake up mean and he'd go to bed mean. And he'd come home and he'd take his phone apart. So I'll never know to this day if he cheated on me. He wouldn't have an iPhone for the longest time because you can't take them apart. He kept like a Samsung phone that he could take the battery out when he got home. I'm not kidding you. And
That's
so
crazy.
and I'm not the type to look through a phone. I've never looked through my current boyfriend's phone. I don't have a reason to. I love one person. I trust the person I'm with. But looking back on all these little toxic things that happen, I'm like, wow. So we moved away and didn't know anything was wrong with our relationship. I didn't know the pressure I felt every day and how I'd walk on eggshells every single day. I mean, he'd spill food on himself and blame me because I didn't give him enough napkins. That was the kind of stuff I would deal with. And if we were in the car and he got angry, he would park and he'd say he'd walk home. I mean, he would end up calling me later to come pick him up, but he would, yes, it was terribly abusive. I'm looking at your face right now.
Oh my gosh. I would have just let him get out and just keep on driving, girl.
But see, in that moment, I thought as a wife, this is my duty. I'm not being a good enough wife. Maybe I'm not being, this way sexually enough. And maybe I'm not being this way cooking enough. And I just couldn't make him happy. And I'd work these 3 part-time jobs. Plus I had an online business and I'd work all the time. And it was never enough for him. And in fact, when I would be working, he didn't see what I did on social media as work. So he'd always be very demeaning about it, being like, you're always on your phone, you're always editing, this kind of, if you're an entrepreneur and you do what me and Sherry do, you understand that you have to be creating all the time. So it
sounds like it was partly he was uneducated in what you're doing, and people tend to be judgmental when they're not educated on something. But it sounds like he was a little manipulative in the way as well, with just bashing and getting angry and really controlling. It's more of a controlling thing, it sounds like.
Yes. And I didn't see the control until I'd say about a year into our marriage. We had some stuff come up where family came to visit us and we were out of state. And my family had always loved him, but they saw some things. But this time they really saw some things that were inappropriate. And they were so worried. One night he was so mad, they were worried he'd hurt me. And he never physically hurt me other than grabbing my wrist really tight and like yanking me a little. Other than that, I can never say he was physically abusive. But what he did mentally was rough. But where it got really tough for me is even when I knew something was wrong, I separated for a month. I went and kind of escaped with my aunt to DC. Stayed there, kind of took a deep breath, worked on my business, and came back a month later. And during that time, I begged him. I said, please go see the counselor that we had been seeing at church. Go see her like 3 times a week while I'm gone. Please, please, please. And when I came back after being gone a whole month, he had only been to a counselor twice. And yeah, I just realized he wasn't going to work for us. And I still tried to give it my all. But after 24 hours of being back home, he got what he needed physically from me, acted nice enough for about 24 hours, 36 hours. And then, oh man, was making me cry, huddled up in the corner of the house, like in a ball again, hoping he wasn't going to come here. So rough. So I went to the counselor who was a church counselor because we couldn't afford anything else. It's a rough life financially. And she told me, she said, I work for the church. I love God. I can't tell you that you're valid in getting a divorce because you're not being beat and he's not cheating on you. And I said, but I wish he would just hit me. I pray to God every day at this point that he would hit me because then I could feel like I'd have permission to leave. I'm so scared. And she said, well, you can't, one thing I'll leave you with is you can't measure mental and manipulative abuse. You can measure physical abuse, but you can't measure that. And only you can know when it's time to go. Or you can say, this is my lot in life and I'm going to honor God and just pray through it and just accept. She said, after talking to him, you're going to have to accept that he's a narcissist and he will never change. And that's just the way it is. I have to tell you based on, and she was accredited on every level as a psychologist and whatnot. And she said, he won't change. So that's all I can tell you. You have to make the choice. And that night I went through everything on my phone. I would keep notes because he'd spin me around in circles and act like he didn't do what he did yesterday. And, oh, you took that the wrong way. So I started keeping notes in a password lock note in my phone. And I would email them to my mom just in case somehow he'd get in there and delete it so I could remember, so I could feel validated. That was one thing. He would trick me. And it's crazy because I know I'm smart. But when you're in a relationship like this and someone's manipulating you, you start to believe that you're the one just being overly sensitive.
I was gonna ask you if you believed that he was a narcissist, because that sounds like what you were describing to me is that he is a narcissist, and typically narcissists don't change.
No, because they can't see anything wrong with themselves. And I'm not saying I was perfect, but if you looked at me and said, hey, Sophia, I think you could change this to be more honorable to your husband. Oh, of course I would go after it and try to do it, but he wouldn't even see there was fault. And you just can't work with someone like that.
So what made you finally leave? I mean, here's a Christian, you're a Christian and you have all of these beliefs and how you were raised, and you're basically trying to hang on for the long haul, which is nearly impossible when you have a narcissist partner. What made you finally just walk out the door?
One night, late at night, he grabbed a knife and threatened to hurt himself and say it was my fault and that I wanted him to kill himself. That was one of the last straws. The next day he left for work. I called my grandmother and she said, I told you it wouldn't matter. You wouldn't. I was so worried not only to be sinful by leaving, but also the security. Like, what do? I was working these 3 jobs in Florida. If I leave and go home to my family, like, what do I do for money? And she said, you can stay with me. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. You're at the point where you have to do what you have to do. And so I remembered the counselor's words. It's not measurable. Only you can decide this. And I thought, okay, what if I accidentally get pregnant? What if I bring a child into this environment? I would never have an abortion, so I would have to be stuck with seeing this man for the rest of my life. And if I choose to be married to him, be with him forever, I can't bring a child into this abusive environment. And that day, I decided in my heart, I'm getting out of here. And it was the scariest decision ever because I was so afraid things would turn physical. And they never did because I was very, very intentional in keeping texts with my mom very safe. I didn't let him know when I was getting things out of the bank to separate money. I had a strategic exit plan, and my mom showed up and she flew there. I got a U-Haul and she drove my car home and I drove the U-Haul home. And I remember feeling so free. And one of the last things he said to me was, the game was over when we got married because I won, like we could have sex. So I didn't pursue you anymore. And I'll admit that I didn't pursue you, but I also thought you would never leave. And I said, what? You didn't think I was strong enough? You thought I'd feel like I deserved this for the rest of my life? And he just looked at me, got on his knees, hugged my knees, cried. He cried the whole day I was pulling things out the house. I mean, snot coming out of his face. Look, his face was distorted. But at the end of the day, he never chased me home. He never wanted me badly enough. And I could be hurt by that, or I can choose to say, God, let me see. He made it easy to see that I had made the right choice. And I'm so grateful.
Well, and he actually rejected you a long time ago by the way he treated you. And I believe that rejection, and I did a whole episode on rejection is God's protection.
Ooh.
And, you probably, had he not done what he did as far as the knife, there's no telling how long you would have stayed and you would endure that. So I'm glad. I know that you have somebody really special in your life. Robert seems like a great guy. I can't wait to meet him. And so I am really happy for you in that aspect. And I know, I mean, your smile just lights up. I can tell that you love him with all your heart. And that just goes to show you that just because you walk out of the door doesn't mean that there's not someone else for you that God has waiting for you. So I wish you nothing but the best because you deserve it. So I'm going to switch a little bit. We're switching gears. We're going from sad to happy. But we're going to switch the gears a little bit, because one thing that you use is this hashtag, half hippie, half Gucci. And I want you to tell the audience, because you are a social media influencer, and okay, guys, she does not take a bad picture, which just ticks me off. But and I'm going to blame it on your 20s. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to blame it on your 20s. I got to blame it somewhere. But I love that hashtag, because you do like nice things, but you are just so down to earth and with the things that you post. So tell me a little bit about your fashion sense and what you're trying to portray on social media as an influencer.
Oh, I love this question. I'm so happy you asked. So I started this hashtag, half hippie, half Gucci, because I kind of felt like I didn't have a space as a person in real life or on the internet where I could be both a spiritual influencer or a spiritual spiritual or material influencer.
Yeah.
Either or. There's no one doing both. And I am a Gemini. I'm both. I am everything all at once. And I got tired of covering up one side of my diamond to be something that I thought people only wanted to see one side of. So I am a material girl. That Madonna song is my theme song through life. I can't help it. Doesn't mean I love Jesus any less. I always tell people I love God. And in second place, I love shoes. I can't help it. It's just how I am. I study fashion at LSU. Fashion gets me excited. I love nice things. I love nice designs. I love paying honor to the artists that created not only these designs, but these brands that carry so much weight. When you walk in with a Chanel bag, that has so much about your personality, your taste, a class about you. I just love it. And if someone, thinks it's a little too much, I was afraid of that, but that's almost why I created the hashtag. So if someone is kind of turned off by it, then they don't have to be my audience kind of thing.
Right.
Because I know there has to be other girls like me who are like, but I like both. I'm like down to like have my lip injections, but also be down to not wear makeup some days and love the body God gave me. You can do both.
Right. And I know you're super passionate about it, because you get really excited when you talk about the fashion industry and about the outer beauty and the inner beauty and the whole package. So how do you feel about that? So you get your lips done. How do you feel about, I have my opinion, but I want to hear from somebody that's younger than me about injections and fillers at someone that's in their 20s. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that?
It's a different world than whenever you were younger, right?
Oh, yes.
They didn't get Botox till they were 40, but by then your wrinkles are set in. Here's the thing. Wrinkles are evidence of a beautiful life. You've laughed a lot, and that's awesome. But now that they have this technology essentially to keep me looking younger forever, I might as well jump on that train. I know that some people aren't really into boob jobs because of the breast implant illness. I never plan on getting a boob job, but I would say that kind of thing scares me because of your health. And some people, they say, well, Botox has bad side effects. I get that there's risk with everything, but it's something that I like. And I can't, I just want to be me. I don't want to have to hide that part of myself that wants to be glamorous. If I was born at not the right time, but a different time, I might have ended up being a 1930s Hollywood star. That's how I feel on the inside. And I want to take care of myself like
that. So you have that old soul, because you're approaching 30s, but you still have that old soul as well. And you know what? I think whatever is available to help you in any way, listen, I'm about epidurals. I know that there's women that go, oh, I just want to have this natural birth or this tub birth or whatever, to each his own. I personally don't like pain. So I say God created epidurals for people like me. So, I'm thinking, if the epidural is there, women, why are you not taking advantage of this situation? So the same thing is true for the fillers and the Botox. It's not something that we talked about when I was in my 20s. It wasn't as prevalent then as it is now. But yeah, it really doesn't matter, I guess, what age you are. It's whatever you want to do to enhance beauty, whether it, on the outside. because we're constantly trying to enhance our beauty from within. So what's wrong with enhancing the beauty from the outside? And I know you can't talk a lot about it, but before we get off, you've got something in the works that is going to help women. What can you say and what you cannot say?
Ooh, well, I have to say that I'm plant-based, so I don't get a lot of fat from excess dairy, and I do work out a lot. So I don't have a lot of fat in areas where women want it, like my boobs. So maybe like, I'd say 6 months after I left my husband, I went on a date with this guy, and he told me I'd look better if I had bigger boobs and he'd get me a boob job. And I said, no, and we're not seeing each other again. But it got me thinking, well, maybe it would be nice to have a little bit more of a feminine shape. So I just started researching a little bit, and let's just say there's a little something coming out that's all natural for my all natural ladies who want something healthy and vegan and a safe way to enhance your God-given natural curves. So there's something coming
out. You just told it but didn't tell it, girl.
I'm so excited.
I didn't think I was going to get that much out of you, but I did. All right. So tell everybody where we can find you, because now everybody's going, what's the name of her podcast? What's her name? So how can everybody connect with you and on social media?
Okay, awesome. I would love to connect with you all. My Instagram handle is at Sophia Spallino, which is like spaghetti, Italian girl here, Spallino, at Sophias Spallino. And my website is sophiaspallino.com. And if you want to hear my podcast, it's available wherever you listen to podcasts. My favorite place is Apple Podcasts, because as you know, me and Sherry, we love those reviews. They help us get other girls to listen to our show. But you can find my show on any podcast platform, and it's Enlightened the Podcast. And you can find it by just searching Enlightened Sophia, and I'll pop right up.
Oh, that's awesome. And yes, you do have a wonderful podcast. Thank you so much, girl. I appreciate you. I really do. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. You always lighten my load when we talk and always make my heart so happy.
Oh, well, that's what I'm here for. We're all born on a purpose for a purpose. And I think that's mine, girl. So, and I was just talking about superpowers today. And I think one of my superpowers that fulfills me is to make sure that other women are encouraged. I just wished all women that were that way, you know?
Yes. Well, I have to tell you that video you did on Instagram about superpowers really did encourage me today. So if y'all don't watch your stories, they're like crap.
See, right time. So I like them to hit. I know that God's going to show those stories to people in the right time. So guys, I just want to leave you with this before we head off. January 2020, Real Girl Talk Podcast Live is going to have their second annual Create Your Life Women's Retreat and Vision Board Workshop. It's going to be a powerful Saturday. Last year, 2-hour event. It's going to be a 4 to 5 hour event this time with vendors, amazing speakers, presenters. We're going to have a full brunch, even mimosas. We're going to have photo ops, lots of giveaways. The date is to be announced. So make sure you go over to the website, sherryricard.com, get on the email list because the seats are limited. We're only opening 15 more seats than we did last year. And last year we sold out. Make sure you go back and follow Sophia and I on Instagram and Facebook. It's Sophia Spallino, and my IG empowerment is beauty. And if you haven't jumped over and left a review for me, please do. And even take a screenshot and put it on your stories. Make sure you tag either Sophia or I or both, and hashtag Real Girl Talk Podcast. Until next week, keep your encouragement tank full, your faith in God always, and step out of your comfort zone and create your beautiful life.